Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 105 of Navigating Now. Navigating Now is our virtual roundtable series where we come to you live every Thursday. And a special thank you and shout out to all of our communities tuning in right now. We're really excited to have you part of this conversation. I'm excited for today's conversation because I get to host with talking to a dear friend. I'm Molly. I am on staff with Thatium. I'm a designer here on the team. So I am working in Google Slides, in Canva, and Adobe Illustrator all day, every day, talking with our team and translating our ideas and strategies into compelling visuals that go along with that. And I have a blast doing that. I'm thrilled to be hosting this week because we're chatting with Mary Hamby, who is a dear friend and powerhouse creative as well. Mary is the owner and artist of 22 West, a studio and storefront in Charlotte, North Carolina. And they specialize in making artful jewelry and home decor. So I actually first met Mary something like, I think it's 7 years ago now, which is really wild.
Yeah.
I randomly found and took a weaving workshop that you hosted, and I've been a fan ever since. I think I decided that night and might have told you, Mary, we're going to be friends. And it happened. So I'm really excited to talk about creativity and what that is. But first, I'll let you do a little introduction to yourself. So tell us, who is Mary Hamby and what is 22 West all about?
I love that. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here with you guys. I love talking business and getting to share about specifically creativity and business today, which is something that I do on the daily with my company, 22 West. So I started 22 West in 2015. So it was June of 2015. I signed a lease on my first studio, very small, sweet little space in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it really started out of just this deep desire to make things by hand. My background professionally is in interior design. I had been working in the industry and absolutely loved it. I tend to describe it as like the creativity you do with a ruler. It's very technical, very precise, which is a huge part of my personality and my love. And it's still seen today in my work. Very exacting, perfectionist. And I strive for excellence in everything I do. But in 2015, I was just really missing working with my hands. And on that side, I tipped. 51% of me tipped towards creativity. And so I went full time into 22 West with two products. I was making our loom blocks and our woven necklaces, which has been really fun to see over the last 7 years how that's expanded. So now the loom blocks were the primary product for our home decor line, and the woven necklaces were the primary product for our jewelry line. And now that has expanded and changed over time. It used to be just me in that studio in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and have opened our first studio and storefront a year and a half ago. So now we have that customer facing side. We do a lot of wholesale. So we wholesale to stores from coast to coast. That means sharing our work at wholesale shows, meeting wholesalers that way, as well as retail shows, and then welcoming people into our studio to share our work. Like Molly said, I specialize in artful jewelry and home decor. My mediums are porcelain clay and natural fibers. And I really love making things that just feel really fun and special treasures that you're not going to find anywhere else. So we do have that artful side. I always say if you can find it in a store, you're not going to probably find it in my store. So really looking to add something very special to the world and make it a little more artful.
So beautiful. And so well said. I love how you said also that like you tipped that 51%. We've talked about this a couple of times of like that pull towards either kind of creating your own and building something from scratch or kind of being part of something and finding that. And I think we each have almost that 50-50, but kind of split either side of that scale.
Yeah, like I tip 51 towards creativity, you tip 51 towards business. But they're so interconnected. I don't think you can have one without the other. It's like I look to Molly as what would my life have been in this direction. It's like she's creativity in the more corporate setting. I'm creativity on a small business scale. But there's so much overlap.
Yeah. And it's been fun to see how our creativity in each of our areas have overlap and are also really distinct.
Yeah, that 1% makes the difference.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. And so I think, as you said that, like you're 51%, but you're also like really heavily business too.
It's 100% business.
Yes. And so, you're running 22 West. It's a small business. There's a lot of juggling hats with that. And you're also designing all of the products and thinking about where you're going. And so I'd love to get closer to that dynamic of like, what does it look like for you to run a business while also having that creative side and fueling both of those elements?
Yeah, it is 100% creativity, 100% business, and you have to make time for it all. And it's a big, big job. It is not, it's a lot of time. So it's also good to think about like my 7 years. If you multiplied that out by the actual number of working hours, it's a lot more than 7 years of a regular work day. But I would say for me, juggling creativity and business, business is a big part of it because if I didn't have the stores, if I wasn't sending the emails, if people weren't shopping online, if I wasn't showing up on Instagram, there would be nothing to make. So I spend my day, I think of it as it's creative problem solving. So every business it's kind of the business of solving problems. No matter what industry you're in, you are solving problems. And I think the best solutions are often the most creative solutions. So even if we're talking about a law firm or any industry, you are all day a problem solver. So I spend my day thinking through most creative solutions for that. A lot of that for me is driven by limitations, and I don't really get frustrated by them. I get creative around them. So, for instance, back in 2015, I couldn't afford a yarn winder, 2 chairs back to back. Yes, it's a little bit more inefficient. At that time, I had more time than money. And you find the solution. So creative problem solving on the daily, on a very practical level, for me, that looks a lot like 2 hours at the beginning of each day before my team comes. My team comes into the studio at 11. That means at 9 o'clock, that's computer time. I get some of my best work done early. That's also just knowledge of myself. I'm a morning person. For some of you guys, that might be more evening. But I come in early. I get those emails out. I do that work that takes that very concentrated brain work. Then I can be really present with my team and be a leader and a listener and come alongside them. I feel like my best days are when I've done that creative business work at the beginning, so I can be very present with my team. It does not always happen. We do our best. And then, I also think your creativity is best my creativity is best when I'm not pushed. I know some people are like, the night before, are you?
I'm a deadline lover.
I'm like, I love to start work 3 months before. Like right now, I've started designing for spring, summer 2023, because if you say, hey, Mary, I need you to be creative right now for tomorrow, that's not going to produce the best work in me. So I think there's good knowledge of who you are. And if you need a deadline, create that for yourself. If you don't like me, I work better earlier. So if I'm sitting in a drive-through and that's like when the idea comes through my head, I write it down. So I keep sketchbooks near me. I don't force myself. I don't force my creative time. I like to really kind of hit it as it comes to me.
Yeah. I love that so many things. I think right there, that idea of it sounds like you kind of create the structure for the business side of things in order to like when creative comes, like you are able to jump into that. And I love that idea of like you're able to kind of know like I'm on track here.
Mm-hmm.
And so when inspiration strikes or when I have that creative idea, like I can create the space to explore it and jot it down and play with it.
I like that. And it is so much about space and time. So just as much as I need space and time to be creative, I need space and time to send those emails. And I really enjoy, like, there's nothing I love more than feeling incredibly good at my job. And that means showing up, making sure I have the time to do the task at hand. And I spent time very frustrated because I was trying to do that computer deep brain work while my team was around. And it's not their fault that they need me or that things are happening around me. My husband very kindly, so can you tell I don't have a private office? I'm working in very close proximity with my team, and my husband very kindly bought me some big over-the-ear headphones so they can visually see. I tell them, I'm like, guys, I'm going to go in. We say going in deep for an hour. I'm going to go in, put my headphones on, do this. Do you need me before then? Like, is there any questions I can answer? So even, again, that's an example of a limitation, no private office, but there's creative solutions around every problem.
Yeah.
And making sure you're as present as you can be, both for your business and for your creativity.
Yeah. And that idea of, at Thought Team, we talk a lot about creating the space, and it sounds like you're quite literally creating the space that you need to be where you need to be and get what you need done. And so creating kind of those parameters and knowing yourself in order to get that done. Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm the deadline girl. Like I'm not a morning person, so I'm the opposite. You'll find me on my computer till 7 or 8 p.m. In the evening, and that's just what has worked for me. So I know that like during the day is when I'm getting my emails out and my conversations and my meetings, and then like 4 o'clock rolls around and I'm like, okay, I can go deep on a project now. And so it's just like finding that really interesting kind of flow between what needs to happen. The other thing that I really love you talking about is the creative problem solving. I know as a designer myself, there's times where I think people think that creative is just for the artists or just for the designers. And I know you've seen with your business, like it really spans everything. It's not only your products, but it's your brand. It's how you talk. It's how you relate to customers. And like, there is such value in finding creativity and like whether or not you're in a creative role, so to speak.
No, I completely agree with that. And I like even the way you talked about that in terms of customer service, right? There's no one solution for every problem. So I like to read it, take it in. If it doesn't have a very clear solution right from the start, giving myself, again, the time and space to think about it. And then it tends to come to me. But just so in terms of customer service, it's, you have your guiding principles. So I have something I can check against. So 22 West, we want to serve our customers. Our goals are to make the world a little more artful, to spread joy, and to make money doing it. So I need that money to fuel the business and to be able to continue making the world more artful and spreading some joy. So when I have a problem, it's really helpful for me to have those guiding things where I can say, okay, well, maybe on this one, we're not going to make money on, but we're going to make sure we have a customer who's treated kindly and they're going to leave with a joyful experience. Or, but if you're just kind of floating blindly, then I feel like sometimes creativity, it's too big. People talk about creativity like anything is possible. I find that I'm my most creative with parameters.
Yeah.
So, when you give yourself some parameters, then you can think really creatively within them. So I tend to feel my least creative when there's too many options. So giving yourself those guiding principles, a little bit of a box. I would not be afraid of a box.
I love that thought. And I've never thought about it that way, but I've definitely felt that, when someone is just like, hey, what can you do with this? And it's very broad. And I'm like, well, I could do 100 things and I have no idea where to start or what is remotely what you're looking for, versus more of that really specific, like, here is, the platform we're going to share it on. Here's the audience that we need it to go to. Here's the budget we have to work within. Like once you start narrowing down, like it's really fun to see where you can like push within all of those and find really interesting ways to do that.
One of my favorite parameters is the why. So when you and I talk about things, I'm like, why am I doing this? I think that's the biggest, most beautiful, most guiding parameter in business and in creativity and problem solving is, especially when it comes to design, when you're designing something. I think that's like, we so focus on the content, the beauty, right? And we forget, why are we sharing this? So it's going to go on Instagram. Why is it going on Instagram? Why are we sending out this newsletter? And does the design serve the purpose? The big why? Like,
yeah. And that I think that can be such a helpful like question to also help pare down. I think it's so easy to add. And it's also like one of the things that I've learned in designing. It's actually like much harder to design minimal and to have white space and to have like room to breathe in a design. And I think that's true with business and how we live our lives. It's much more easy to add on and keep going. And I think that why question helps us say like, is this still serving us? Like, is there actually, this worked a year ago, but things have changed, and is it still what we want to be doing?
And we say clear is kind. So be kind to yourself, be kind to your people, be kind to your audience, and go ahead and clarify it for them, for yourself, for everyone who's going to participate and interact with the design.
Yeah. I love that. Absolutely. So one of the things that, we're talking about, this creativity kind of feels like a big idea. I think it's also more and more we're seeing companies or teams that are really tapping into the power of creativity and thinking about, yes, it's the visual look and feel, but it's also kind of the personality of a brand. It's how you're working together as a team. There's kind of so many elements that make up the who you are that I think creativity kind of can encapsulate. And that helps really create that distinct personality or brand, or like, why are you different? What sets you apart? And 22us has done an incredible job at doing that. I know when I see something scrolling and like, before I see 22us, I know the picture is from 22us. And so like, having that distinct brand, style, personality, what do you think that's kind of made possible? Like, what does that create for your company and for the work that you do?
Well, even the way you said that, like, I think one thing is it creates brand recognition, which is really important in our very saturated world. It also allows me more creativity because of the parameters I set up, where if I want to, now that I've worked so many years to establish who we are and who we're not, when I want to do, we just did a collaboration with an artist who I really love and respect, whose work is very different than mine. But because I knew exactly who we are, and more importantly, my community and my audience knows who I am, then I can partner. It made possible those partnerships because people can still hear my voice. Practically, the way that I do that is, so when we think about something we're seeing, something I'm designing, so in my industry, that's colors, it's materials. So if I want to do a spring summer collection that's really bold in color, which might be a little unique for me, then I'm going to make sure that I'm using materials and shapes and compositions that my customers know and recognize as me. Leaves me room to play with color, and vice versa. If I want to do, a really beautiful soft palette, but I really want to play with an interesting shape or a new material. I brought in some Tampico fibers, which is harvested from cactuses, not a material that I usually use. And I really wanted to weave some brooms. But because I was using colors that my customers knew and fibers, and there's a whole education component behind it, it allows my creativity to wander because I can rely back on something that I've spent a lot of time building. So a little familiarity with something new. And that just takes time.
Yeah. To learn that I think probably about yourself and also like evolves with time.
Yeah.
I love that idea of, you even talked about with that collaboration. That's something we're thinking a lot about in Thought Team as well in the creative space, is how do we partner? How do we bring on contractors and work with other creatives to in their sweet spot, right? You kind of find their zone and find that happy middle of like, okay, I can do a lot of layout and translation, but like illustration's not my biggest design gift. Yes. And so it's amazing to then go and say, like, that is a gift of so many creatives. And so how can we partner with an illustrator who has the same look, feel, personality to their work as ours, and like that creates such that like happy union that you're talking about.
The way you're thinking about that is spot on too. Like, I love the thought of finding your own strengths, knowing your weaknesses, bringing in partners when it makes sense, and knowing when to say that might not be the right partnership. And it's not always, based on the things you might think it is. Like, it could be a really beautiful brand that you really love and respect, but there's not a strength there that you need. So I think having those guiding principles really helps.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've talked a little bit about this idea of playing with both the business and the creativity and the power of creativity. What are some ways that you like tap into your creativity? Like what are some of those kind of parameters that you need to create, or how can you kind of set yourself up to say like, okay, I know I need to kind of go and be in a creative space. Like, let me harness that energy. Do you have any kind of go-to things you do, places you sit,
coffee I drink?
Yes.
Allow me to enlighten that. I feel like that's definitely, my husband is also a creative, and we were literally just sitting on our front stoop waiting on you to arrive. And he was talking about, he's got 2 weeks till a pitch deadline. And he was, you can see it in his eyes, like, okay. And he's kind of a deadline person, very motivated by deadlines. And that would make me very anxious. I do give myself deadlines too, and you've got to work towards them. But I think for me, start early, start often really helps me. Sketchbook all the time. You have to know yourself too. Like, for me, my solution is not really looking around. I think you have to be very careful because you're going to see a lot of ideas that already exist if you're going to spend a lot of time looking around. When I do go outside of my own brain, I like to go to a completely different medium. So if I'm making jewelry, I might go look at some paintings. I find a element or a thread of what you're doing and see what happens if you change it. If you do. So for me, that's color, that's materials. And I find a lot of joy in combining things in new ways. So nothing new under the sun. We are all building upon what has come before us. And also what you're creating for yourself. Like, I view the last 7 years as building blocks, that little gifts to myself. And I've gotten stronger as a designer, as a creative, as a maker every year. So I can also go to my own history and see, okay, well, what, now that I have all of this time behind me, how can I make that better, improve upon it? So iterations. But also, bringing in something new. For me, that might be a waxed linen. This year, I'm playing with a little bit of color. I'm working on spring, summer. I mean, in a big sense, this year I went on a trip to a warm place in January. So I was in Mexico in January because I was designing for spring, summer, and that's a little hard to do in the middle of the snow. But there's very smaller ways to do that too. I don't unfortunately get to do trips every January. Trying to get your brain in that space, think about combining things in new ways. For instance, last season I did this really beautiful watery floral. I was just having a conversation. An employee of mine asked if I was bringing back the florals, and I was like, Well, people loved it. I loved making it.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, what if they weren't watery? What if they were really opaque and flat and fabulous? And I've been doing some more geometrics this winter. So it's like, okay, what if we combine some very thin, really sleek geometrics behind a flat, opaque floral, right? So
Mhm.
that's kind of a practical example of how we go from watery painterly florals from last summer to maybe something, I don't know. Check
New.
back April 1st. I'll tell you how it's going.
There you go. I it's incredible because I think a combination of your interior design background and being a creative, like I can see exactly what you're describing. You can use your words to describe that image so well. But what you were saying of like looking kind of outside, even industry wise, to like see what you can kind of pieces you can bring in or what inspiration strikes reminds me. I was watching a video a colleague sent me where they kind of suggested that of for ideas too, of if you have a new prototype that you're working on and you're like, we need a new marketing idea or a new look to our website, going out, and even if you're in looking at what Spotify is doing or what another company is doing and saying like, oh, they have a really cool way of showcasing this. Discover Weekly, I think, was the example. And so like seeing just like little tidbits can, I think, really kind of just push your brain to think about like, oh, you can take it in a totally different direction.
Yeah.
But it kind of gets those ideas started. And I found for me to kind of there's times where I'm more in that business and strategy headspace, and when I need to get in the creative space. And this might work for others who don't think you're creative, but I promise you, you have creativity in you. It looks different for everyone. I think there's also power in like momentum. So I found that when I have a bigger project, I go to those quick, like 10-minute, 30-minute tasks to get done, and like checking the box for me on those. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. It's kind of the warm up. And there's a lot of really interesting short creative exercises that can do that. That help you just kind of channel that mindset and get there. So then when you go into a brainstorming space or thinking about a new line, you kind of have that momentum and somewhere to start. Because I think it's really hard to kind of start cold. But I think that warm up's really important.
I like that. I also, speaking of starting cold, I feel like I crave big expanses of time. I'm like, oh, well, I'll be creative when I have a week to be creative. And you're never going to have a week to be creative. You're never going to have, all conditions perfectly perfect. And honestly, too, like you said, it's like it builds its momentum. So it's like, okay, if I can just do 15 minutes of that thing. And it's the same with business. So if it's like I have these big pitches that I'd really love to make and it's on a big list, this is a real life example. And I'm like, okay, I did the small ones last month and I've been waiting and putting off till I had a whole day to do these big pitches, and I'm never going to have a whole day. So just a couple of days ago, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do one big pitch. And I did it, and it felt great. And I feel like it's been a what's that, snowball?
It's snowball
in
effect.
a positive way.
Exactly. You gain that momentum. You see kind of what else is there, which is great.
And I do find a lot of joy in checking off those little things.
Yeah. It brings whatever you said earlier about like, oh, interior design is like design but with a ruler. Like I love so much. I just loved math growing up, and so finding those ways to like, there's a lot of, that's why I love layout design and some of the strategy, because there's, I think, a lot of that analytical side of it that comes into play. And so I'm kind of finding ways to bring in like what I loved doing into how I'm a creative and like what my design looks like, which is really fun.
I love that. And giving your brain a break. Like I will, things that you love, like cooking dinner can be like very productive for me, because it's time when my hands are doing what I love, but my brain is free, and it allows me to, wander. Your brain can wander when you're doing something you love. And that can be when I have some of my best ideas.
So good. I'm sure we could talk forever. I think both of us love talking both creative and business and that intersection of them, how to kind of channel one and the other, which is really great. But before we really wrap up, we love to do rapid fire questions here to end out our navigating now. So a couple fast ones for you, Mary.
Okay.
Are you ready? Yes. All right. First one, what are you reading, watching, or listening to right now?
Oh my gosh, I'm doing all three of those. But the one I love the most is Chef's Table. They just released they're doing featuring on pizza. And I just think it's really cool to watch somebody doing what they love to a high level of excellence. There's a lot of joy in that for me. So it's beautiful to watch, fun to listen to, very inspiring.
Love that. I'll add it to my list. Okay, the next is a prompt. So I'd like you to think of something that you admire about yourself and fill in this prompt. Okay. If the world were a little more like me, it would be...
The easy answer is artful. I think it's pretty fun. But another thing that I love about myself that I used to not is my perfectionism. I think it's one of those things that can be seen as a negative, but that just striving for excellence, that's another one.
Yeah, I love both of those. And yes, I think the world would definitely be more artful too. Okay, last one. I've been to your studio and I know you have a beautiful window, in several places, but right where you have your computer. So if you kind of find a moment, which there's not many, but you can find them, to just kind of gaze out of the window. What are you thinking about? What's going through your brain?
First thought, I need to pull that weed. That window is like, there's always grown up right there. If I'm looking out my window, what am I thinking about? Probably my to-do list. Is that a little sad? The to-do list is big, guys. It's really big. But I love it. Like, my brain is all consumed with all things business, all things creativity. And I feel like you could give me 70 years and I will not be done thinking about all the different things that I would like to do.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for joining me, for sharing your thoughts, your story, here on Navigating Now. Again, thank you all for tuning in. We're here every Thursday live at 3 p.m. Central. You can find all of our episodes at thoughttium.com/live. And we will be back again next Thursday. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Mary. And we'll see y'all soon.